Boom. According to that, I am live. Welcome to Tokyo Tonight 2. My name is Hiko Simon. You are with me once again every Sunday night, 22:30 JST, as you can see in the information above here. And very good to see. Let me turn around the mic so it's facing me properly. Good to have you all in the chat already. Well, for a start, I'm on time tonight, so that's quite nice. Have a reasonable number of topics. The main thing is talking about the new Japanese government, the Sugar Hill Gang, but of course some other interesting news. Subaru the car, and a good car it is too. Hello, good to have you here. Already in the comments we had JMac217 who was watching the Formula 1 last week and wasn't able to make it for the live, but showed up actually extremely early this week. Hope you're still with us now. We've got Razel Ghul at the Games Begin, very excited to talk about PS5. I don't have a lot to talk about other than I think I'm going to get one. Yeah, we've got Quint Rankid. Awesome to see you as always. We've got the FMI, Andrea Morboy, Quint Rankid, I think I already said. Tech Art 2, and Subaru the car. Chris Jack. Hey, good to see you, Chris Jack. And remember, as always, say hello. You're part of the show. That's why I put the comments there. You can see them there. As always, if you want to get my attention, do what Tech Art 2 just did there with a big howdy. You can do it at Mark Hiko Simon, and it will show up orange, which is more noticeable than other comments. I will try my best to respond if you say something to me. I will try to, if you've got a request for a topic or a question or whatever, I'll try to pay attention to those. So the Atomic Tom, good to see you. And 2 weeks teaching holidays there in Australia, Andrea Morboy. Well, definitely enjoy the break. We've got Mr. Cordy Chep. Almost missed it. Well, you almost missed what? The show's just starting. I don't know. I can't tell if you're kind of disappointed to arrive, but I'm glad that you're eating ice cream. That's a good thing. Japan chocolate season is ending. We're heading into autumn here, although we're still having this kind of messed up halfway between hot and stupid and humid and autumn weather. You know, fall, like they say in America, but yes, indeed. So in summer, we generally get chocolate, but there's among all the reasons that 2020 has been the worst year ever, there's been less chocolate than usual. I know these are first year problems. Thank you for the butter emojis. Yeah, I will take those with good humor. Will, good to see you there in the comments. And everybody else. Yeah, please remember, say hello as you rock in. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to hear about. We will go through the topics. I wouldn't say I have a small amount of topics tonight, but most of it's really about the government, which I know you don't find very interesting. So if I talk about that efficiently, well, this could be actually an efficient show. I've actually also, just last night, I made my first Wii track that I've made in months, actually, for some reason. It's just my routine. I got out of the habit of making tracks, and I was just pinging with Foghard, who was actually experimenting with kind of an awesome Final Fantasy sort of remix track, and he's actually very good at what he does. And it occurred to me to do it. I've been watching, one thing I've featured in the topics tonight is I've been watching an awesome documentary, it's a series. It's actually they're numbered as 5 parts, but the 5th part has like 3 1-hour parts, and so it's basically like what's that, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, it's like 8 hours, and there's more episodes to cover the history of UK club music, which is kind of like all the genres that I really like come from the UK. So I was really enjoying that, and that got me in the mood to make some tunes. So I must admit, I would like to get back into doing some tunes live. Plus, of course, just this evening, I actually downloaded an awesome external plugin synthesizer with just heaps of awesome sounds that I would love to play around with and do that as a live sesh, maybe as a separate one. So, that is so funny. The Atomic Tom, is that message? Oh no, that's from Andrea Morboy below. You are yawning. It's funny, it's held for review. It thinks I'm going to be triggered by yawning. I don't understand the emoji censorship thing. I mean, if you're going to censor any emojis, if YouTube really understood me, they'd be censoring the butter emojis. But there you go. 30 degrees there in Australia. Well, it's getting hot already. We are in the crossover point of the seasons already indeed. Akuhe, good to see you. And Ahmed Usul, hello, right back at you. Good to have you here in the comments. I don't know what's happening there. Maybe I should make a track about butter. Thank you for the suggestion. It'd be an angry track, obviously. yeah, so look, I think we are going to jump into it. I thought for a moment that it was actually the Atomic Tom's gingerbread that was being censored, and I thought that was interesting. But I was wrong, so I guess it's not. I don't know why Are You Wanting Emoji is that, but yes, playing it up there. Have your fun. I'm just gonna jump in. Remember, if you're joining, please just say hello. It's fun to have you there in the comments. That's what I capture them for. Sometimes funny to find out what was there when I wasn't paying attention after the show. First of all, Japan has the census. That's what it looks like. It's a big sheet of paper that comes around. If you're watching this from Japan, fill it out. I did it myself. Well, and when I say fill it out, you don't have to fill it out on paper. I remember in New Zealand growing up, there'd be kind of university students that would like go around to your house and they'd have a nice chat and they'd ask all of your personal information and they'd write it down and go home. And it was always kind of a thrill that they do this every 5 years. I think there's every 5 years they do this in Japan. Yeah, except this time it's actually working quite well. You can actually, it gives you like at your address a password and a login. You go onto a website. The census is actually available in like 10 languages. And the English is perfectly understandable. I just did it in English online. It took like 10 minutes to do. If you are a foreign resident of Japan, I think it's a really good idea to respond to this. Of course, some people might see it as a hassle, but the point is, the census is everywhere. They're the basis that they decide. It's how they grasp the demographics of the country that you're in. So, they want to know when there are foreigners, and if they realize that there are lots of foreigners living in your area, they're more likely to provide services for foreigners and consider, special types of programs and funding and things and whatnot for that sort of thing. So although I think that foreign residents may be prone to ignoring this, I would encourage everybody to fill it out. I mean, this is how they grasp our existence, which obviously has been a problem with things like COVID-19, where foreign residents who were caught outside of the country when they announced the lockdown, were not allowed to return to their homes in Japan. There really is still a lack of awareness of us as having normal lives. So I think this is it's an important thing to do, I think, actually more so if you are like disabled or you're a single parent or you're a foreigner or whatever, things which actually are outside of the default expected salaryman or whatever that governments sort of need to take into account when making planning. So fill that thing in. It was actually super easy and good to do. I see in the comments we've got Rizdale, hello from Nagoya. Hello, Nagoya. Hope you fill out your census form. Also, we've got E. Devoid from Arizona. Good to have you here from Arizona. It's kind of funny. Yeah, I know it's crazy. I have an image of Arizona. Lots of movies get made there and it's crazy hot, although I can never tell how hot because I don't understand the degrees, the temperature system that they use in the US. But I remember I saw this year some weather services are starting to show the US in Celsius, and I actually realized, you guys actually aren't just complaining. It actually is pretty hot there. Good to have you there anyway. I know it's early in the morning, so I do appreciate it. Good to have you here, A. Devoid. Census guys said this is mandatory to fill in Subaru the car. In Japan, they said it's mandatory. It's kind of funny. I mean, I guess I wonder about that. I don't know if it's mandatory or not. I think it's a good idea to fill in anyway. I did see someone today complaining about having to put their name on it. But the governments, they want to know your name. Dan H., awesome to see you. Good to have you here in the comments. And everyone else, remember as you join, always good to see you, say hello. But remember the census, I think, is actually, in the end of the day, governments can't really do anything for you if they don't know you exist. So fill it out. Anyway, Andrea Morboy, you're still in lockdown in Melbourne. Will be 3 months when it was originally 6 weeks. Now they're saying October rather than, New Zealand I'm reading about as well. I mean, they found one case, like in Auckland, and they shut down the entire city. So, everything's kind of relative. Tokyo, by the way, I think I've got this in my topics in here, but we're having between like 150 and 220 cases every day just in Tokyo. I mean, Tokyo, of course, has 14 million in the prefecture, and 30 million in the greater, in all the suburbs and stuff like that. It's kind of funny though. If you follow my Twitter, you'll notice that probably for the first 5 months or so, I was faithfully every day racing at 3 p.m. to give the latest number, and it was kind of like I was thinking as well, hey, this might go for a few weeks, this might go for a few months, but now I can see this really going like I think Dr. Fauci saying that we should expect this to go through to the end of next year. I mean, even if they get a vaccine, which I'm not expecting, I don't think it's realistic to expect anything like that until midway next year. And even when it's out, how long is it going to take to give to everybody before get everything into a state that you can return to normal? So one of my favorite Adult Swim sketches. I love all the Star Wars sketches from that. They've got a fantastic series. They've got like it's not Forlom. What's his name? The guy from the Cloud City with the robot headset. I've got him just like dancing for 10 hours. They've got like Boba Fett telling stories that he didn't die by falling into a Sarlacc pit. He had a much cooler death than that. But my favorite one is the Emperor, where he has to go up like a never-ending escalator in the Death Star, and coming down the other way there are stormtroopers who keep saying, what is it, Your Highness, or whatever. They keep saluting the Emperor, and the Emperor has to salute them all back, and he gets more and more tired. And over time, that's kind of what was happening to me with the COVID-19 updates. It started wearing me down, and I just stopped. But yes, it's kind of bad here, but fortunately not getting worse. There again, Northern Hemisphere, we are going into winter. I've heard in Europe that they're already like seeing spikes in the countries up there. So yeah, this is unfortunately going on for a long time, and I know it's really tough down there in Victoria. Hang in there. This is just something we have to get used to, unfortunately, for a long time to come. Theodore Sharp, excellent to see you. Theodore Sharp, as you can see, if you spell my name correctly, it will flash orange, but I got you anyway. Of course, I spotted you there. Who else has joined here? Anyone else? Is it just Theodore? Theodore Sharp, anyway, good to have you. I know you're getting up early in the morning, I think, where you are. So, toilet paper emoji. It's funny, Andrea, you are the keeper of all the forbidden emoji. So there we go. Ahmed is not taking an RNA vaccine. No thanks. Well, yeah, I don't know. It will be, well, exactly, Andrea. So I'm not expecting anything till the end of next year, honestly. Setsuna, good to see you. Haven't turned live in a while. Well, you're here now, Setsuna. It's awesome to have you. This is the excitement of live, is that we can have a conversation. So remember, everybody joining, if you at Mark Simon and you spell the name correctly, it will flash orange, like Andrea just did. And you can ask me questions. You can tell me to talk about a subject. You can tell me to dance like a monkey. I mean, I might not do it, but you can certainly do it. Lots of toilet paper, so yes, indeed. Emoji test. Yeah, see, the Atomic Tom, you're using the wrong ones. Andrea knows all the taboo emoji. Remember, fill out your census forms, kids. Nothing to do with Japan. I just find this interesting. Barbados is going to... at first I thought they said that they were going to remove Queen Elizabeth's head, but that's not actually what they're going to do. They're just going to remove her as the head of state. I'm kind of from New Zealand and Australia, and I kind of find it embarrassing that New Zealand was like the last country to adopt the Statute of Westminster and become an actual independent country in the Commonwealth. And when I left the country as a lawyer, having finished a law degree in 1999, we still had our highest court as the Privy Council in the UK. We refused to be independent. Australia has the right idea of at least wanting to be, to have an Australian as head of state rather than someone who is primarily the queen of somewhere else. However, they're just endlessly fighting about how to do it, and in the infighting about which system to change to, they can't make up their minds, and so all the referenda so far have failed. On that basis, credit to Barbados that they have that they are brave enough when New Zealand and Australia are not, to actually have someone from Barbados as the head of their own country. Which, by the way, the actual word for a country that doesn't have a monarch as head of state is republic. It's a Republican referendum. Terms take on different meanings in the US, but Queen seems like a lovely lady. I don't have anything against the royal family. I'm just thinking, I'm not from the country that she's queen of. We can still be in the Commonwealth. You can do everything, but constitutionally, the idea that we're not secure enough to have someone local as head of state is a bit weird. So good on you, Barbados, if you're watching this. I see comments flashing orange. What else have we got here? France is terrible, and considering the French Open starts tomorrow. Well, indeed. And a shame, of course, that Naomi Osaka pulled her hamstring and can't participate. But there again, she's got to get better, so that is a good thing. Yes, Theodore, you're still in Japan. I didn't realize you're still in Japan, so all the better. And thank you. I could see that. Back into it. I was just watching this is crazy. I was just watching random videos on YouTube the other day, and there is this video of this person who goes around and just travels on like fancy airplanes and records everything. And apparently on the A380 first class flight from London to Singapore, this person only spent £200 and used the rest on air miles. And I guess they do a vlog based on traveling, so they run up the miles. They showed what first class is like in Singapore Airlines on this plane, and you don't even get like a big cushy seat. You get a whole room like this. I was just watching this, and like I as someone who hasn't even ridden on a train or a bus or a car like since March, watching a video of someone traveling in first class, like the menu was just like awesome. I mean, I watched this, I was like, and I'm such an idiot. I travel so much for business, and I don't properly keep air miles from that. I mean, I know people who game that and they get great hotels and great upgrades, and I never do that. And I looked at this and I was like, damn, like. So they get a full bed, they get a big TV, they get an awesome food menu. I mean, just watching it, it was like being sort of on the flight. I wouldn't have expected to enjoy this as much as I did. But if you are feeling cooped up, if you are missing traveling or any form of transportation, as I am, I found this video kind of therapeutic. The Singapore Airlines first class suite. The other thing that was interesting was you see there's a wall there, but if you are like traveling as a couple. I mean, if you're paying full fare, I couldn't even imagine how much it would cost. You'd be paying like $10,000-$15,000 for a flight. I mean, which really would be ridiculous. But if you've got air miles, I guess you can do it. Apparently, you can. If you get the suite next door, they can remove the wall, and the beds will be together on the in the middle of the room. I'm not exactly sure what you're allowed to do after that, but hell, I mean. That is just nuts anyway. Actually, that was a very fun video. I highly recommend it. Queen Rankit, isn't she technically an empress? The Queen Elizabeth? I don't know. I don't really even care. I mean, she would be... You know, I know a joke about empire, kingdom and country. Which is rude, and I'm not going to say it, but it's kind of hard to describe England or her as the monarch of an empire anymore. It doesn't seem appropriate. That could be the case. Dan H., you live in Windsor. Wow, absolutely detest the monarchy. The Queen's Castle is 5 minutes walk from your house. Well, this is the thing, at least from New Zealand, while we do have, you know, the Queen and the silly walks and the hats and everything sort of built into our constitution technically, at least we don't have to pay for it. I mean, I don't know how I would feel living and knowing that I was paying and having to watch, you know, lovely, but it's basically a dog and pony show to pretend that they have sovereignty, which you don't need all of that for. I mean, most countries don't have that. You know, I mean, they're a nice German family. Let them let them be. I mean, yes, like I say, they seem lovely, but I'm glad I'm not paying for it, and I'm sorry that you are, Dan H. So yeah, the new Prime Minister, Mr. Suga. A couple of funny things with Suga, by the way. So in terms of who is he got elected by default, more or less. It was only elected by an internal party vote within the party. But Suga, for those of you who know, he's been the spokesperson for the LDP for Prime Minister Abe for the last 8 years. Like the whole time, he's just been the guy who does all the press conferences. He's been the Scaramucci of Japan, except much more boring and good at his job for all of that time. And he's just inherited the Prime Minister position and has appointed a new cabinet. A lot of people getting reappointed. Out of the total cabinet, there were 2 women, which amounts to 10%. Also of the vice minister appointments. The vice minister appointments are actually bureaucratic appointments. It's something like 2 out of 25. I mean, again, the percentages of women representation, again, continues to be woefully low. The biggest thing that's really interesting, apart from the fact that his name is Suga, I mean, it's Suga, sure, but how are you not going to pronounce that Suga and think of all of the, plus, of course, he is one of the most uncharismatic politicians you could ever imagine. He's the opposite of a populist. He's grown up sort of being an administrator of ministries, particularly the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. And that's been the only interesting thing about him becoming Prime Minister, is the shift in power, that now he's doing favors for his buddies in that ministry, which is actually kind of in a good direction. I'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, the other thing that's interesting about Suga is that his name is extremely confusing. So when they had him as the cabinet spokesperson, The first problem is that his kanji. The thing about like Chinese, some people think, well, Chinese has more Chinese characters than Japanese, so Chinese must be harder. Japanese only is run it down to like a standardized 2,000 kanji, whereas I think Chinese has like even on the simplified kanji that they Chinese characters that they use in mainland China, I still think it's like 10,000 or 12,000 or some number. And in Taiwan, I think they use 20,000. They use even more. But the thing about China is that every kanji only has one reading, right? So if you learn it, once you learn that character and what it says and what it means, you're done. The problem with Japanese is, one, when they imported the kanji, they sometimes made mistakes with the meanings. It's like importing words from French and German into English with different meanings because we got the meanings wrong, but those became the meanings in English. That happens a lot. Happens a lot in Japanese. The other problem, of course, is that because these kanji were assigned to words that generally already existed, or they were borrowed from Chinese but people heard them wrong, it means that you not only have Japanese readings and Chinese readings, but often you have multiple possible Chinese readings and multiple possible Japanese readings for every kanji. If you've learned Japanese, you'll know what a nightmare this is. Basically, you just have to memorize every word in the entire language and the kanji associated, because there isn't a logical system associated with it. The name Suga can be pronounced also kan, and it's kan, which is like a kind of a person, or like a bath under a roof, is also the same kan that's used to describe the cabinet secretary, the kanbo chokan, which is like kan is another problem. He's like the so he's like the so when you see his kanji as the chief cabinet secretary Suga, it's got the same character kan in Suga, but the same kanji, except it's got the same thing twice. To make it even more confusing, when the Democrats were prime minister, there was a prime minister kan, K-A-N, who has exactly the same kanji. So apart from the fact that it looks like kanbo chokan. So it looks like kan. People don't know how to read it. You look at it and you don't know, especially now that you talk about Prime Minister Suga, it's the same kanji that you would say for Prime Minister Kan. And actually, Taro Aso, who is still the deputy PM and famous for gaffes and making mischievous jokes, he has already publicly mistakenly called Prime Minister Suga Prime Minister Kan now twice, which is kind of funny because the LDP hates Kan, but they have the same kanji even though they're pronounced. It's very confusing. But it offers opportunities for jokes. I originally was thinking more Sugar Knight, sort of scary and intimidating kind of Sugar than the Sugar Hill Gang. But there again, if you want to describe the cabinet, I do think there are possibilities. Not exactly the sort of person I could imagine in a video for Pour Some Sugar on Me, but yes, he is the sugar that we are going to have to take for the next wee while. Ahmed, you said it, Khan indeed. Coming back quickly, Andrea, you do pay taxes to our government. Some of it goes off to the monarchy from Australia anyway. Well, I mean, I don't know how much you guys are actually sponsoring the corgis or cutting the lawn at Windsor Palace. You pay for the Governor General position and the stuff associated with that. And I suppose she has like a special seat that she might sit on when she's in Australia that possibly they pay the upkeep of. But I doubt that there's very much going on with how much they're actually paying to England. Dan H. from the Times, Mr. Suga's election as Prime Minister in front of the house in which he was born. Oh yeah, he was born poor as well up in Akita. There was one of more than 300 people gathered. Only 3 of them were children. Yes, well that's the thing about the region that he's from. He's from Tohoku, the cold, northern, rugged, hard-men part of the country, where it's kind of the rural Scotland of Japan. People there are basically grumpy and, they can be quite friendly, but the image is that they're kind of tough and mumbly and gruff. And if they have kids, their kids run away. I have friends who are from that part of Japan, and as soon as they can, they move to Tokyo. Those towns are now filled with elderly people. And also the LDP chapter, they're very old-fashioned. When they showed him being elected and they went to his hometown LDP chapter, the whole room had like wall-to-wall old men, except for one woman, who I don't think was making the tea. I think she was actually in the middle, so she was actually a participant. But, not very good balanced representation. So, yes, indeed. I mean, he is actually, unlike most prime ministers and politicians in Japan, he's not a multi-generational. His father, I think, was a mayor or something, but he wasn't like a national politician, not like Abe, like de facto aristocracy royalty in Japan. The Koizumi family as well, multi-generational, former, sons and grandsons of former prime ministers. He's not like that. He's kind of worked his way up, and he gets some respect for being a bit of a plotter for that. But yeah, the main thing that's interesting about Teka 2, are new kanji still being created? Good question. As far as I understand, the answer is no. In fact, what's happening is that when they review the list of standardized kanji, they are reducing the list little by little. So I think when they're reducing the list, they're really looking out of, right now they're down to like 2,000 kanji. So they're looking at like the 5 or 10 most unused kanji, and they're generally removing those. The only thing about removing kanji is that people often have names that were adopted from the Meiji period, which was when Japan used a lot more kanji. So there are people with names that you can't type on a computer because they don't use standardized kanji, or you have to go to a lot of hassle to input them. And often because of that, people will choose kanji from standard kanji that are really simpler, or derivative of it, or simplified versions of those kanji than the real kanji. So for names, I don't know that they're adding to them. They are reducing them. They're not reducing them dramatically, but that is happening. And in terms of China, I don't know what's happening with Chinese. I know that Taiwanese like to mock mainland Chinese, that mainland Chinese characters are very simplified. That basically helps for education and literacy to simplify the Chinese characters. But of course, Taiwan still uses traditional kanji, which are more intricate and take a bit more effort to learn. And they like to mock the Chinese that, can you read this, when they use complicated kanji. Japan has both simplified, changed the meaning, and reduced the numbers. They're not adding to them. Good question, though. Christopher Luke, no, there are 55,000 digitized kanji. Do you mean like kanjis in Japanese used kanji? I know that it is possible to dig out when you've got like non-standard kanji names. That's pretty, or place names. That's what they can be used for. But yes, pretty much that is the only real use outside of the standardized joyo, the standard kanji. So yes, anyway, the other thing that's interesting about Suga that's happened is, as you know, I mean, every country has this thing, the old yes minister thing, about the tension between who's really running things. The politicians who get elected and get unelected and come in and out and have scandals, or the bureaucrats who actually run the day-to-day of the ministries. And Japan, the old thing is, of course, the bureaucracy, you pretty much are employed there for life. And of course, bureaucrats in every country, the idea is that your job is to, be a vessel to implement whatever policies government tells you to do. But of course, so long as policies are not of interest to politicians, or which in most countries politicians try to pretend to be interested in a lot of policies, and so they'll say, I'm going to reduce immigration, and I'm going to increase taxes, and I'm going to take away everyone's firstborn, and they have all these policies, and the bureaucrats have to go and do it. But to the extent that politicians are not interested in certain policies, but they're policies that are important, like the funding of libraries or something like that, bureaucrats will generally decide themselves. And the thing about Japan is that politicians really don't care very much about policies. They'll generally state a theme that they want to pursue, but generally speaking, they'll leave it up to the bureaucrats. And the bureaucrats, of course, get all the funding from the Ministry of Finance to go and implement whatever programs they have. And so the status of ministries is determined by kind of how sexy and how much control and power they can get from the policies that they administer, and how much money they get from the Ministry of Finance. And correspondingly, basically what happens is politicians, their job is actually, they kind of work for the bureaucrats. It's kind of the other way around here in Japan. So basically, this is why Japan changes prime ministers so often, because they'll have prime ministers who are like backed, one might be by the transport ministry, and he'll come out and say, we're going to build a lot of roads. But then, the Ministry of Health will be getting upset that we haven't had a guy, backing us for a long time. So they'll pull out some scandal on that prime minister. They'll do a musical chairs. They'll rotate. And a new prime minister will come and say, okay, I'm going to give a whole bunch of extra funding to the Ministry of Health, and we're going to build hospitals everywhere. Abe was a really big backer of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. And based on that, there was some tech stuff, there was some energy stuff, although not really as much as you'd have expected. But basically, a lot of key government positions were administered by people from METI, from the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. Suga has been a lifetime sort of patron of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, basically the regulator that used to look after the telephones, so basically, they were, and the thing about the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications is they compete with METI for influence over who regulates IT. They both have lots of conflicting laws, like over privacy and over digital technology, as well as over communication technology and so on. The Ministry of Economy generally oversees renewable energy as well. Whereas, General Affairs oversees phones. But Suga is basically a champion of this other ministry. So he's gone and kicked out. I mean, they're not fired. They've just been reappointed. But he's kicked out all of the METI people, and he's put in all of these internal affairs people in all these posts. And when he announced his agenda, before he even said anything about COVID, he said, we're going to digitize the entire government. It's been a big thing about how so much Japanese paperwork for the government requires physical seals and paper to handle, and how inefficient that is, and how backward and falling apart Japan's IT system is. This came across years ago with the pension system, when they were still keeping paper records for Japan's pensions and losing the paper. And the few digitized records they had were being run on 1970s and 1980s mainframes. They weren't being run on modern software or modern systems. So he's actually said that he's going to put the Ministry of Internal Affairs in charge of this, but he's going to make reform of government through basically updating the IT systems of government a priority, which is actually, I think there are, and the opposition went and made a big speech today that no, we should be focusing on renewable energy. I kind of like that these are both the areas that I've focused on my whole life, IT and climate change related technology and law. So, but the thing is, when you say you're going for renewable energy, you're saying we should put METI bureaucrats in charge of everything. And when you're saying we should be going for IT reform, it actually is saying that we should be putting these different bureaucrats in charge. So what's actually happening right now is there is like a reshuffling of the bureaucracy, the first one in 8 years. And this is Suga basically repaying favors to his friends who have sort of supported him getting up to where he's at. So there are interesting dynamics there. And as someone who works in IT, I think it's a good sign that Japan is finally looking to update IT infrastructure. I mean, all sorts of infrastructure in Japan's been underinvested. I realize this isn't very interesting, perhaps, but this is the real substance. If you ask me what's going to change, nothing's really going to change in terms of immigration. Nothing's going to change in terms of relations with other countries. At least Japan's going to be on the same path that it's on of basically following the US and whatnot. But I think you are I'm hopeful that we're going to see the government actually finally get web pages that don't collapse every time there is an earthquake or a typhoon or a whole bunch of natural disasters and whatnot. And we're going to see pension records actually become accessible and not disappear. Just stuff which has been kind of embarrassing for a long time. And right after that, I do hope that they also do look at renewable energy and updating the grid and whatnot. Aaron, good to see you. ASDF, exclamation mark 12131. Did you say you were in Israel last week, by the way? Anyway, that good to have you here. Who else is here? No other comments to me. Christopher Luke, I see. Japanese, it's about the same in Chinese, 55,000. Okay, well, there are 55,000 digitized kanji, but in terms of like official kanji for education purposes, the number is, I think, now 1,980 or something. I guess you would have them all digitized because there are archaic place names and so on. Whoa, Subaru the car, there is some crazy kanji right there. Aaron, don't worry. Good to have you here. We've got Nissan R33 Z-Tune. Good to have you along here. And and Kangen Kodos. Back in with the right account. Good to see. Quint Rankin, I'm glad you find it fascinating. Thank you for finding it interesting. Online visa applications would be nice. What do you say? That's exactly the point. So they're promising that they're going to be able to, in fact, and there are already things like, even from last year, they've said that every new spending on IT infrastructure needs to be cloud first, needs to be native on the internet, in the cloud, and sort of built. It's cheaper, it's more secure, and you can actually build applications that are more resilient and will actually allow things like online processing. The government's told everyone to do that. The problem is that all the procurement manuals all throughout the government are all still written, and they're written in the 70s, and they were written by the vendors that made the mainframe systems that are still being used. So actually changing all of that's such a big task, and that's why they haven't made much progress. But he's actually setting up what's being called a digitization or a digital agency, whose sole purpose is going to be to basically kick in all those doors and get those updated so Japan actually has like a modern-looking government, which it desperately needs. I mean, it's going to allow them to save money and spend money better. as well as provide better services. So I think this is actually a cool thing that Japan really needs. So I'm actually optimistic in that regard. The opposition, I'm going to come to that a little bit later, but yeah, they're still failing, but that is what it is. Anyway, how are we going with the chance of flying out of Japan and flying back in for all of us that are not citizens? Kangen Kodos. Well, they have from this month, I believe. You can now come back into Japan, although the criteria are really strict. You actually have to get a negative COVID-19 test result in the country that you are coming from within 72 hours of flying back to Japan, after which you get tested twice in Japan and you have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. On top of that, there was a case this week that Rochelle Kopp was talking about where apparently somebody who got a test in some country, what country was it, like Switzerland or something like that, the test was like, instead of saying negative, it said not detected. And when that result was shown, their application to return to Japan was rejected because it didn't say negative. This is the immigration service can't tell the difference between negative and not detected. And so, and these are people whose families and jobs are sort of at stake over these things. So it still is a mess, but people can theoretically return. It is tough, and it shouldn't be as crazy as it is. I mean, for that criteria, it really should be the same. I mean, on the one hand, Japanese should be getting quarantined just the same as anyone else, and the clearance criteria should be equivalent, but it's not. But you can theoretically come back in. I am certainly not scheduling any travel to go outside of Japan until we are well out of the woods on this. I'm not expecting to be able to travel for a long time yet. And there are a lot of people still stuck. So, yeah, the chance of flying out of Japan and flying back in that are not citizens, it can be done, but honestly, unless it was a real emergency, I would avoid it. So yeah, and definitely talk with your embassy and talk with immigration before considering it. Dan H, great news. Japan's got a new butter supplier, Pilwate Dairy Industries from Sri Lanka. Well, that's interesting. I don't know about Sri Lanka as a dairy producing country. I know that New Zealand and Australia have been trying to do that. I mean, with the new trade deal with the UK. I mean, the UK, I would even take British butter, but they went for Stilton cheese instead. We've got all the cheese we want from France, and it's actually quite good. Yeah, I'll take Sri Lankan butter. I mean, anything that can end the ridiculous. Yes, you know where I'm going to go with this, but the ridiculous situation where all the butter in Japan is made by dying out average 90 years old farmers whose butter is being planned by a central planning agriculture ministry and is buying and distributing it all, and is ending up in shortages and queues. It's ridiculous. So come on, Sri Lanka. I'm very glad to hear that. Andrea Mobo is still on the same topic, watching Tour de France, final leg into Paris around the Arc de Triomphe. Well, that's good to see. I've got a cousin who's actually living in Barcelona. He's super into cycling, so that's pretty cool. PS5, we'll come into this in more detail. I had to look at this carefully. I didn't quite get it at first. If we zoom in there, you can see the enormous PlayStation 5 with the Blu-ray disc drive. I'm not sure I'll get that one. Honestly, I don't really keep discs for anything anymore. There's a digital edition. So the PS5 in Japan, the price is actually, given the power of the machine, 49,000 yen, which is cheaper than the US. The US is $499, but if you take into account the exchange rate, that would be in Japanese yen, 55,000 yen, and there's something for 49,000 yen here. So they're going to be cheap. They're going to be awesome. The digital edition with no drive is also enormous. I don't know we would fit it in the room, but there's going to be Sammang Kyusen 39,000 yen. So that is awesome. Comparison, there's the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Pro. And here is the number of Japanese women in politics. I did enjoy that graphic. Everyone was talking about the PS5, and there are people worried about other things, so that was quite good. Can we go into butter planning meetings? No, we cannot. They are held in secret. Hey, this is a Soviet-run butter economy. You know how it works. You do not ask questions. You get the butter that you were given, and no more. So yeah, anyway, PS5 was announced. Those prices are pretty good. The power of the machine is pretty good. The lad, he I don't want him to feel left out at school. In fact, by the way, for those of you who, it's kind of funny. I mean, the lad came to me the other day, and he's like, Yeah, Dad, at school, Fortnite's cool, but people are starting to play Apex. Can we play Apex, please? So I today just installed Apex. I've heard about it. I've heard it's the people who sort of get sick of Fortnite as being for kids, or the sort of serious gamers go off and are playing Apex now. Well, I've got news for you. All the kids are moving to Apex. So I installed that. I've heard that that's going to be coming out on Wii next month and iOS later this year. So yeah, I'm probably going to play that a little bit as well. You know, just for the lad to keep him company. But the power of these things, these are pretty cool. So I am kind of excited about that. November 12, I believe they're going to be released, and I'm probably going to get one. I'm probably going to get that digital one that's going to be cheaper. And hey, Sugar, it's good to see you. Not a gamer. I'm not really a gamer either, but you know, now I've got a kid. I've got a, and hell, I mean, I had the Atari 2600. I loved that. And I had a Sega Mega Drive and 32X, which wasn't really that great. Then a PS1, PS2. Yes, Mr. Cordy Chip, you fell asleep. Then I'm doing my job correctly. The lad should play Doom, says Budley Salterton. Well, Doom's a bit of a classic. I don't know if do they even have that on the new consoles. There are better games than Doom, actually. I mean, Doom was, of course, great for me in my time. But good to have you, by the way, Budley Salterton. As well as 12 teraflops, says Christopher Luke Shubis. Anyway, good to have you. Good to have our Panama representation here in the comments. Moving on, this is what I was talking about before. Japan is going to form a digital policy agency led by someone from the private sector. But yeah, they're basically going to be focusing on really looking at overhauling IT, which is going to be good news, and it's really needed. I mean, you're not going to be able to get so much stuff in Japan just gets held up because of this. So, you know, because of inefficiency and lack of IT. So many faxes, so many hankos, and you know, if they're really going to push on this like they say they're going to, that's great for me. This was super cool news this week. Again, not related to Japan. Well, there is a more, Setsuna says there's a more recent release of Doom. Well, I know that now that you mention, I think I saw some news about that. It was remade and is wonderful, says Akuhei. On a side topic, Toyota won 24 Hours of Le Mans for the third year in a row. I did not know that. That is cool. Thank you for the update, Akuhei. That's, Toyota's kicking ass. That's kind of cool. Am I 45, says Mr. Kordychep. Are you asking me that? I'm 44. I'm not 45. But I was born in 75. I'll be turning 45 later this year. What can we say? What can I say? Quinn Ranked, Plow Adventure instead, a twisty mage of passages, all alike. I don't understand what you... Plow Adventure, is that the name of a game? I'll look it up, but Doom looks kind of cool, but you know, the lad's probably a bit young for it, we'll see. Anyway, Venus is awesome. You see those dark streaks in the clouds of Venus. As you all know, I'm an astronomy space freak. I just like to look at this stuff. Venus is the brightest object in the sky after the moon. Obviously, you can only see it after sunsets because it's always closer to the sun than us, so it always looks close to the sun. It is the same size. It's basically identical to the Earth in size. You have the same gravity there. And in fact, in the upper atmosphere, you actually even have the same temperatures and the same pressure. The only problem is there isn't any water, and there's very little oxygen you need. And of course, all of the sulfuric acid in the atmosphere is a problem as well. But apparently, you could actually be there you could hang out there on balloons, and you wouldn't even need a pressurized suit to walk around outside. You'd just need air and something to protect you from the and it could float on top of the clouds like water, like a boat. You just need the protection from the sulfuric acid, which would be a problem, but it wouldn't be the same as like having a puncture in a suit on Mars or on the moon, where you'd have a full depressurization. So anyway, Venus has always been super cool. Of course, the problem is that the surface temperature is something like 490 degrees or something like that on average, enough to melt lead. But of course, up in the high atmosphere, it's actually similar to Earth in terms of temperatures, air pressure, and gravity. So it's always been interesting, but of course, because you can't really land on the planet, everyone's been focusing on Mars. However, there's been speculation for a long time that those dark streaks in the atmosphere, those are not the surface, those are the clouds. The clouds are so thick. But there have been people speculating for a long time that those dark streaks might actually be like organic. They could actually be like bacteria floating around and revolving in the atmosphere. And yeah, apparently there's some recent spectral analysis which found that those streaks contain a lot of an element called phosphine, or it's a molecule called phosphine. I think it's pH3 or something like that, which apparently on Earth only occurs as the result of organic processes. It's a byproduct of sort of algae and bacteria produce this as an output. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that there's bacteria making it there on Venus. There could be some other process that's creating it. But all of a sudden, it looks really possible that we are looking all this time. We've been looking at Venus. It's closer to us than Mars. It's more accessible than Mars. We get close to it more often. And it could be where life is. So while everyone's rushing to the moon and Mars right now, all of a sudden Venus looks super interesting. And there's a whole bunch of videos at the moment about plans that NASA has, at least ideas for how we could travel and even live on Venus. We wouldn't live on the surface. We'd live in the clouds, like on a boat or something that would float. But it on top of the clouds, but it still is quite doable, and it's just super interesting. So I found that news very, very exciting. I am following the Dynetics Moonlander was announced this week. They beat Boeing, they beat Blue Origin, and they beat Musk to get a feasible Artemis moon landing sort of mission sort of ready. Of course, what Musk is doing with the Starship is like amazing, and they've got more tests coming up. So as a kid who grew up like an astronaut, someone who wanted to be an astronaut and someone who wanted to go on the space shuttle, and just seeing that basically the space shuttle was made before I was born, flew in 1981. I remember the first flight, but that basically NASA didn't advance any technology like until I was like 40 years old, pretty much in terms of space technology. And now within just like the last 5 years, there's been this explosion of space technology, and the idea that, it could very well be affordable by the time I retire to go up and, as a tourist, go and spend time in lower Earth orbit in a floating hotel space station. Like that could happen, and there could very well be trips, and by that time that I'm able to go to that space station, we could very well have confirmed that there's life, at least on Venus and probably in other places. So I don't know. I find that news super cool, and it's great to read about. I see there's more comments and there's more people there, so let's catch up on that. We've got Dan H. You find it funny how UK is celebrating a trade deal with Japan, but Hitachi scrapped a $20 billion nuclear power plant. Well, that's right. And of course, you've got all the car manufacturers. I think Nissan said that they were closing plants because those plants were put there to sell to Europe. So on the one hand, it's great they've got a free trade deal, that they've got someone to sell stuff to. That's kind of good. But in terms of the idea of Britain being like the preferred point of entry into Europe for people outside of Europe, because of the language and the proximity and so on, I mean, England's still going to lose out from Brexit, no doubt. I mean, it is great news for both countries to have free trade. I mean, it should be the default everywhere. There should be, and it shouldn't be bilateral. It should be by multilateral frameworks. It is good news, but it certainly isn't. It's not as good as what Britain's giving up, no question. I mean, I understand Britain's not giving up it for the trade; they're giving up for the sovereignty and the immigration and whatnot, and they've got to sort those issues out themselves because they're not going to be able to avoid those things through other frameworks. But it's pretty good news. Andrew Mulway, have I seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari? No, I have heard good things about it, but I have not seen it. I would like to see it, I must admit. I should actually check if it's on Netflix. Is it on Netflix? I should check if it's available in Japan anyway. Shubas, the last time you played a game was 1986, and it was Pac-Man. I had Pac-Man. I had the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man, which wasn't really as good as the arcade version, but I had that in 1984. Actually, I had that from 1983, and that was pretty cool. Christopher Luke, I should check out Game Pass for my lad. It's it's great value if you don't want to buy games every month. We don't buy a lot of games and consume a lot of games, and he's only playing like 1 or 2 games, so it might not be necessary. Also, I don't know what Game Pass is. Is that like for PC, or is that for a specific platform? It's kind of, hey Aaron, you're astronomy freak. Yay, astronomy freaks. I could talk at length about that. Aaron, what got you to be an astronomy freak? I got to be an astronomy freak from living like where the skies were just like amazing. It was like we only had 2 channels on TV, but the sky was better than the TV where I lived in the central North Island. Plus, there was nothing to do in those towns. Generally, if you live in small towns where there is nothing to do and there is no TV channels, Yeah, it's and you can basically see the Milky Way clearly with the naked eye, and shooting stars and everything every night. Yeah, that's a pretty good formula for becoming interested in space. But and it's kind of it's the one thing. There's the one thing about Tokyo that I dislike is that you cannot see the sky here. I mean, you can only make out a couple of stars. Although I know if I had a car and maybe if the lad gets into it, I might. I would like to actually. You can get up into the mountains here, and because Japan has so many mountains, you can actually get into proper dark skies without having to go too far from Tokyo. You can get really nice sheltered spots. But yeah, I really miss that. Dan H, I find it funny how that's what you said that they're celebrating. Indeed, King and Kodos, you should try planning KSP, Kerbal Space Program. I will look it up. I don't know what that means, but I will look it up. Thank you for the suggestion. KSP. I'm gonna write that down right now. Actually, KSP, Kerbal Space. Okay, we'll see. Andrew Mobile, get Elon Musk to sponsor my journey there. Hey, Mr. Cordy Chap and me, just get Elon Musk to sponsor. Well, he wants to sponsor, get everyone there. I don't know if they are two-way trips, but yes, he is definitely sponsoring. Whoops, that just skipped there. Greg, good to have you, Greg. Old Mainframes, just got a job analyzing AS400 RPG code for a company wanting to move to cloud and microservices. Not exciting, but highly remunerative. That's the field I'm in too, and in most countries, it's moving from NT, server architecture to cloud, but and from SQL and Oracle databases. In Japan, you're moving from COBOL, you're moving from freaking Unix, and NEC and Fujitsu, custom-made mainframes. It is painful and it's not sexy, but there's a lot of work. And, starting with the government, there's like $1 trillion worth of IT work sitting there in the government to be done. They're setting up a whole agency to push it. So if you have those skills, you're in the right place at the right time. So good on you. PH3 indeed, Atomic Tom, thank you for the correction. COBOL, LOL, but no, America's dying right now because there are computer systems. They fired all of their COBOL programmers, and now they're finding out that they need them back to be able to fix them. America. Astronomy joke, stop it, Mr. Cordy Chap. No respect. Budley Salterton, well, who knows? Anything is possible. Aaron, sorry, I see the astronomical humor has flourished like the Venusian yeast. I'm not sure if it's on. I'll look it up, but I've heard good things about it. I assume you recommend it. That's why you're putting it in there. Iraq299, good to see you there. FVF is not on Netflix. Apple has it. Okay, I'll check. I don't have Hulu, but I have Apple, so I might check that out. Greetings, says Believe in Yourself. Good to see you believe in yourself. Jupiter and Saturn have been very visible lately. Well, that's good to see. Slow Pete, hello, good to see you, Slow Pete. Good to see we've got more and more people coming into the comments. And Mr. Cordy Chip, I did not know about KSP. No, I'm even more intrigued. Typically, the approval ratings of Japanese cabinets, there's a graph, and it looks like this. It sort of starts, I guess I should start over here because this is like a mirror thing. It goes like this. So he's starting up high, which is kind of ironic because it's not like he's coming in with a clean slate. He's been running interference for Abe for 8 years, including his scandals. Like having the Sakura viewing party with a whole bunch of Yakuza members and shady multi-level marketing scamsters and whatnot. And he said, well, you can't really tell what a Yakuza is, right? As a defense for the Prime Minister. He's been kind of doing that for a long time, and yet because he seems like a trustworthy kind of guy is the main reason he's got a high approval rating. But yeah, we'll see. That won't last very long. I mean, there are like former cabinet members on criminal trials at the moment from when he was still the cabinet secretary. So yeah, that could have gone longer, but he's starting high, so that's a good thing. I mentioned as well the problem between so this kanji over here, can I zoom that? I can't really zoom that, but I mentioned the kanji, the first kanji that you can see there, maybe you can see here. So the kanji there on the left, kan, that can also be read as, typically you would read that as kan, but you can also read it as Suga, the current prime minister's name. So the problem is that Taro Aso, who is kind of mischievously, he's got a He said a lot of terrible stuff, and he's a terrible human being and someone that you wouldn't want to have as prime minister ever again, although he doesn't want to be prime minister ever again either. But already he's made the mistake multiple times of accidentally calling the government the Khan government, which is actually a member of the opposition that they were kicked out of government by. So that's kind of funny. Anyway, kanji. Hard even for Japanese people. Good night, Andrea. Have a good night there. Oh, and I see more people there. We've got good night. Have a good night there. Christopher Luke. Don't think you should use consoles, but if I do, the Microsoft subservice. In Japan, nobody plays on Xbox. We've got a Switch, and we're probably going to get a PS5, but I will check it out if we play on PC. Thanks for the tip. Dan H. used to live in a town in which William Herschel found Uranus. So he used to live in, I believe that was the town Slough. Okay, so is that the right pronunciation? Slough, isn't that where they set The Office? I always thought Herschel was from Yorkshire. For some reason, I always had an idea that he was from the north of England. Is that? And my image of Slough is that it's like in the middle. But please correct me on my geography. But I'm a fan of William Herschel. He invented. I handmade a telescope, by the way. When I was in high school, I ground the mirror. It took me 6 months to get a parabolic 6-inch mirror that I put into a wide field reflector telescope. He didn't do the reflector, but he actually invented a specific type. He had an awesome homemade telescope, and he used it to discover planets. So yeah, I'm a big fan of William Herschel. I know the astronomer well. That is awesome. Yeah, so Japan is about to build. Well, Japan actually has already. Right now, the tallest skyscraper in Japan is in Osaka. It's about to be overtaken by a skyscraper that's going to go up in Toranomon in like 2 years from now. And about 4 years from now, we've just announced another new skyscraper that's going to be built right beside Tokyo Station, which is where I used to work. And the building looks kind of cool. It's kind of cool how they've got that suspended on top. They're going to call it the Torch Tower. That doesn't seem like a good idea, apart from the fact that, of course, it inspires images of disaster movies. It's also actually the name of a hotel, of a building in Dubai that has actually become a torch tower multiple times while being called that. I guess it does look a bit like an Olympic torch, and maybe it's to remind of that. But yeah, you know, it is amazing, the development around Tokyo Station. I worked there when there was like nothing, that you couldn't even, there was like you had to walk like 10 minutes to even find like a, like a izakaya that you could go out and eat anywhere outside. And it's become this amazing shopping and, going out and eating district. And this is going to add to that. This isn't on the Marunouchi side, it's on the side sort of towards Nihonbashi. But it'll be pretty cool. I mean, it's just amazing how much development there is. It used to really be that I remember when I was first backpacking in Japan in the 90s, I thought I should go to Tokyo Station and check it out because it's Tokyo Station and this is Tokyo. It must be interesting. And it really wasn't. You normally would go to Shibuya or Shinjuku. But now Tokyo Station is actually, it's kind of fancy, but it's really a place to check out. It's amazing, the development around there. So that's kind of cool, but I think they should really reconsider the name. Kono, he's like one of my... he is one of my favorite. It's not very hard competition. Obviously, it's the LDP, but Kono's kind of an interesting character. He's got a good sense of humor, and he's actually shown some initiative in the roles that he's had. He's been put in charge of administrative reform, which is obviously a big priority right now. So he opened up on his personal webpage. He said, if you have something to complain about, bureaucracy or red tape, you can send me a message about it here, and I will read it and try to see if I can do something about it. As you can probably imagine, that wasn't really a good idea. Well, it was a good idea, but of course, he discovered within 24 hours he had 4,000 responses on it, and he shut down the site because he said, I can't cope with all of this info. So he says, I'm going to process it and we're going to relaunch it. But yeah, the red tape hotline, as you can imagine, in a country like Japan, and that was just the web interface. Imagine if he had allowed messages to be sent by fax. It probably would have been even more. So but I don't know, he's kawateru. He's eccentric, but in a kind of interesting way. I still like the idea here. When he was defense minister for less than a year, like he just sort of looked at the Aegis ashore, the RR, the pirate shooting down missile system that the Americans were making Japan pay billions of dollars for, and he sort of said, well, this isn't working, and he just cancelled the whole thing. And everyone got upset, even within the LDP, that he would just sort of make such a big decision, but he did, and it was kind of in the circumstances the right one to make. And yeah, he's kind of interesting to follow. So I thought that was interesting. This is a documentary I mentioned at the start of the show. I spent 8 hours this week watching this awesome documentary on the history of UK club music, starting from Acid House, going into the Jamaican and Caribbean history of immigration into the UK, and the sound hall sound, starting with ska and rocksteady, and how it morphed into all these sort of forms of music in the UK, and how it connects to sort of modern stuff. They go into house, they go into drum and bass, they go into garage and two-step and dub. There's another episode still yet to come out that is going to be talking about hardcore and big beat and stuff, which again, there's so much music that when I used to DJ like drum and bass, and I drum and bass like two-step and stuff as well, it's all UK stuff. And this documentary has got just so much stuff packed in. It's a lot of time, but it's the best thing I've watched in ages. If you're into UK club music, it's a great documentary to watch, and not just great for the music, but also they've really gone into the history, particularly of like the Caribbean communities, and exactly like how the sound halls got set up, and how they had to set these things up in the UK because they were prohibited from going into nightclubs. And they set this up, and these became the places that the whole UK sort of music industry came out of. It was really, really good anyway. So it's UK, but it's an excellent series. It's by Bearing UK. And if you look it up, that UK Sound Acid House documentary, there's like multiple episodes. That's episode number 1, but it's by, the website is, or the channel is Bearing UK, and it's really, really good. So highly recommend it. YouTube music. Somebody asked me with my running every 2 days, and I sort of post my times and my pace, and I always mention the BPM of music that I listen to. It's great to listen to. I use an app called Pace DJ, which can beat shift, so I can actually have quite a wide range of BPMs, but I generally run at about 169, 170 BPM. That's my cadence that I'm running, and I'm listening to music that's at that thing. So I'm basically kind of, dancing to music while I'm running is kind of the way that I do it. And drum and bass is good for that, and hip hop is good for that. Because it's like half beat, and drum and bass is like that full thing, as well as sort of old fashioned hardcore and stuff. And someone asked me, hey, I want to run too. Do you have a recommended list of music between 165 and 170 BPM? Now, because I can beat shift with the app that I use, I listen to music like from 150 to 190. Not that I have that much 190, but I've broader than that. But I looked at what I have from this app that's just in that 5 BPM range, and I got a list that's actually pretty good. I made a YouTube music playlist. YouTube music is free. It's accessible to everybody, and I made a playlist of what I listen to when I'm running, at least the music that I find helps me get some more bounce in my step when I'm feeling tired and unmotivated. So you can check that out. That's going to be my take. It's mostly drum and bass with some hip hop there. Makes it fun to run to. It's also great when kickboxing. It's nice for hitting the bags when your arms are tired, I find. We are up on time. We've got a couple more, not many more to go. The opposition leader, Edeno. Oh man, the opposition, what a train wreck. So the basic story there. The Atomic Tom, can I type the name of the app in the chat? It's an old app and it doesn't seem to be being updated anymore, but I find it great for running. It's called Pace DJ. And what it does is it will detect your iTunes if you've got an iPhone. I don't know if it's on Android, but it will take your music library. It will it'll auto detect the BPM on it, but you can manually input the BPMs as well if it couldn't read it or if it's wrong. And you can also use your iTunes playlists and whatever, and it will basically select. You can say what BPM you want it to be. It will shift the BPM. You can have it do that, and it's really great for running. I find it really great. It's a good app. The opposition. God. The opposition, which is basically the life of Brian opposition. They spend more energy fighting each other than they spend fighting the government. The story is this. I think I might have mentioned this before, but the story is this. The Democrats, when they became the government, they basically collapsed during infighting. There were so many factions. They all agreed that they're going to stop fighting and they're going to try to be a serious government. They lasted 12 months and then they kind of collapsed into fighting with one another. And when they did that, they started stabbing each other in the back, and everyone thought they were a disaster. They broke all of their election promises and they got kicked out. And when they got kicked out, all of the people who were fighting, they decided, screw you guys, and they exploded into a bunch of different parties, but mainly into two Democratic parties. The national, people, the National People's Democratic Party and the Constitutional Democratic Party, which were basically just factions of people that hated each other, as well as some other people went to other little parties on their own. So the whole thing just disintegrated and fell apart, and they were splitters, Life of Brian stuff. The two biggest parties realized that, because they've all split up the opposition vote so much, there is no opposition party polling much more than 5% right now. So they said, we've got to get the gang back together if we're going to get elected. So months and months ago, the leaders of the two main former Democrat parties that have Democrat in the name, the Constitutional Democrats, which have 100 people, and the National People's Democrats Party, which has 40 representatives in Parliament, the leaders of those parties agreed, okay, we're going to merge the parties back together. And when we merge back together, we're going to form a new party name, and we're going to elect a new party leader, just to show that this is not a takeover, this is a mutual remerging into a new party. And people are saying, oh, just call yourselves the Democrats, just reform or whatever. Although some people don't want that name because they don't want the bad memories about what a disaster their government was before. So they basically, after months of haggling and fighting and so on, they finally agreed that they were going to merge. And a couple of days before the merger was going to happen, the leader of the smaller party, the National People's Democrats Party, says, yeah, well, the whole party's going to join, but I'm going to quit. I'm going to just be independent. I'm going to quit my own party and the Democrats, and I'm going to be on my own. And when he did that, 14 people from his party went out on their own as well. So the other people had basically been sold off. The remaining people in the party moved over to the and then they held the party election on the new party name and the new party leader, and of course it was 100 to 36, and so they voted to have the same leader and to call themselves the Constitutional Democrats. So they basically just annihilated the other Democrat Party, and they got back together. But having finally gotten through all of that, now the leader is now sort of stump speeches, and he's basically saying, we should be investing in renewables instead of IT. We should really be investing in both. He was misquoted as saying that we shouldn't invest in IT. We should invest in windmills. That was a misquote. He said we should invest in both, but he thought it was backward looking to look at IT. But again, there's so much stuff that you could criticize about the government, and they don't criticize at all, ever. So they're just a disaster. Japan is talking about, Suga is saying that he's considering actually talking with President Tsai of Taiwan. China has said that you better not talk to Taiwan. This is very much the emperor has no clothes. It's like a little kid. If you mention that the emperor's naked, we're going to chop your head off. I feel bad for Taiwan. I think at this point it shouldn't be any offense to China to acknowledge the fact that Taiwan exists, and it has done really well with the COVID-19, and they're a neighbor and a friendly neighbor of Japan, and that the Prime Minister should be able to talk to them. But of course that is not the way that it is, and China's kind of pissed off at the moment, but that's a thing. Japan has the oldest, I thought this was the oldest person in the world. I think it's getting recognized by Guinness Book of Records as the oldest living person. Has just reached Kane Tanaka. She's just become 117 years and 261 days. I always thought to get to those sort of crazy old ages, you had to be living on Okinawa or some remote healthy island, but she lives in Fukuoka, mainland, big city, and she's rocking it. She's 117 years old. Japan now has something like 80,000 people over 100 years old, and that number is increasing. That is also kind of crazy. She's throwing up the peace signs. She drank a bottle of Coke. I mean... It's like she's trying to, end it on purpose to celebrate. She grabbed a can of Coke, and she's like, it's a can in the shape of a bottle, and she was throwing back a fizzy can of Coke to celebrate, and ate some chocolates and threw up the peace signs. She is the oldest person in the world. That's some crazy stuff. I'm glad I'm living in Japan. And COVID I talked about in the beginning, and that's all the topics. We are 8 minutes over. Quint Rankin, China's still promising Taiwan one country, two systems. Yeah. Yeah, that is a somewhat tarnished brand right now, obviously. But yes, Kang and Koda's Life of Brian. It's like you're old enough to understand that punt. Splitters. We're all forgetting who the real enemy is here. The opposition of Japan is the opposition in the Life of Brian. I'm glad that someone understands that. It makes me not feel quite so sad. That is all the topics. As usual, I'm a little bit over, but what can you do? It's a big country. A lot's going on. Remember, everybody, stay safe. If you're in Japan, enjoy the 2 days off. I've been here 22 years, and I still can't remember the public holidays. So every public holiday ends up feeling like a bonus when I get them. So yeah, 2 bonus public holidays this week. If you're everywhere else, of course, take care, especially down in places like Australia, and it sounds like UK might be going into lockdown soon. Just do what you got to do. We're all in the same situation. I'm very much looking forward to we can do meetups so I can travel. I'm going to travel like crazy when this is done. But all right, 299, I'm glad that you like Life of Brian as well. Release Brian. Anyway, I'll stop. I will not do that. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up, or message me or anything like that. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Greg. Like if you like. Thumbs up if you liked. If you didn't like, watch something else. Good to have you here always. Thank you for joining me. Quinn Rankid, I have a question. Are there any naturalized citizens in the Japanese police? I think if you're a naturalized citizen, you can be a Japanese police. You have to be a naturalized citizen to have a civil service role. So I think you can naturalize. I don't think you have to be born Japanese. In terms of the police, I assume so. I assume that there are probably naturalized Koreans or whatever who are in the police. I don't know the definitive answer. I know that you have to be a citizen, but I don't think there's a problem with being naturalized for that. Tech Art too, indeed. Always look on the bright side of life. King and Kodos, appreciate the info in chat. I appreciate it as well. Thank you, everybody. Remember, like if you liked it. I'll be back next week, same time. I've got nowhere else to go. Have a good week. Peace. Keep cool till after school.